The Golden Lion restaurant sat like a jewel in the heart of London's West End, its golden letters gleaming under the soft glow of street lamps. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across white tablecloths, and the quiet murmur of wealthy diners created a symphony of privilege. This was where the city's elite came to see and be seen, where a single meal could cost more than most people earned in a week. Marcus would move between the tables with practiced grace, balancing plates with the precision of a man who had spent 15 years perfecting his craft. His black vest was immaculate, his white shirt crisp despite the heat of the kitchen. At 4'2", he had worked in restaurants since he was 16, climbing from dishwasher to head waiter through sheer determination and an unshakable work ethic. His hands, scarred from years of hot plates and sharp knives, told the story of a man who had earned every promotion through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Tonight was particularly busy. A corporate event had filled half the restaurant, and Marcus and his team were moving at double speed to keep up with the demands. He didn't mind the pressure. In fact, he thrived on it. There was something satisfying about orchestrating perfect service during chaos, about ensuring every guest left happy even when the kitchen was drowning in orders. Then Marcus noticed table 7. A man had just been seated, and everything about him screamed wealth and arrogance. He wore a suit that probably cost £5,000. His watch caught the light with every movement, and he held his phone like it was an extension of his body. His name was Richard Blackwood, though Marcus didn't know that yet. All Marcus knew was that this guest had already snapped his fingers twice to get attention, something that made every experience waiter's blood run cold. Marcus approached the table with his professional smile firmly in place. Years of experience had taught him to remain calm regardless of how customers behaved. He had served everyone from kind elderly couples to demanding celebrities, and he had learned that patience and professionalism could diffuse almost any situation. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Golden Lion. My name is Marcus, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with something to drink?" His voice was warm, welcoming, the product of thousands of similar greetings. Richard didn't look up from his phone. His fingers continued scrolling as if Marcus didn't exist. Several seconds passed. Marcus waited, maintaining his smile, used to this kind of behavior from certain types of guests. Finally, Richard glanced up, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Champagne. The Dom Perignon 2008. And I want it now, not in 10 minutes. His tone was sharp, cutting, designed to establish dominance. Marcus nodded politely. "Excellent choice, sir. I'll have that for you right away." As Marcus turned to leave, Richard's voice cut through the air like a blade. "And waiter, try not to take all night. Some of us have important things to do." A few nearby diners glanced over, sensing the tension. Marcus felt a familiar tightness in his chest but pushed it down. He had dealt with worse. This was just another difficult customer, another test of his professionalism. He would serve this man with the same excellence he showed everyone, collect his paycheck at the end of the night, and forget about it by morning. But what Marcus didn't know was that across the city, his younger brother was finishing a workout at his private gym. Jason Statham, action star and one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces, was thinking about surprising Marcus with a visit. They hadn't seen each other in months due to Jason's filming schedule, and he missed his big brother, the man who had raised him after their parents died, who had worked double shift to put food on the table, who had sacrificed his own dreams so Jason could pursue acting. Jason had no idea that right now, someone was treating his beloved brother like dirt. He had no idea that within the next hour, his life and Richard Blackwood were about to collide in a way that would change everything. The stage was set for a confrontation that would become legendary, a story that restaurant staff would tell for years to come. Marcus returned with a champagne bottle, its glass cold and sweating in his hands. He presented it to Richard with a formal ritual that luxury dining demanded, showing the label and waiting for approval. Richard barely glanced at it before waving his hand dismissively. Marcus poured carefully, the golden liquid bubbling into the crystal flute with a soft whisper. He set the bottle in the ice bucket beside the table and stepped back. "Will you be ready to order soon, sir, or would you like a few more minutes with the menu?" Marcus asked, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the growing knot in his stomach. Something about this man set off alarm bells, but he couldn't quite place why. Richard took a sip of champagne, made an exaggerated face, and set the glass down with unnecessary force. "This is barely cold enough. What kind of establishment is this? Do you people not understand basic service? His voice carried across the restaurant, causing several diners to pause mid-conversation. Marcus felt heat rising in his face, but kept his expression neutral. I apologize, sir. I can bring fresh ice if you'd like, or perhaps a different bottle from our coldest storage. What I'd like is competent service. Tell me, how long have you been doing this job? Because it seems like it might be your first day. Richard leaned back in his chair, a cool smile playing at his lips. He was enjoying this, Marcus realized. This wasn't about the champagne at all. This was about power, about making someone feel small to make himself feel big. Other waiters had noticed the situation. Sarah, a young server who had been working at the Golden Lion for only 6 months, caught Marcus's eye with a sympathetic look. She had been on the receiving end of similar treatment before, and Marcus had been the one to comfort her, to remind her that these moments passed and that her worth wasn't determined by cruel strangers. Marcus took a slow breath. I've been in the service industry for 15 years, sir. I assure you, we take great pride in our service here. Let me get that fresh bottle for you immediately. As Marcus turned to leave, Richard's next words stopped him cold. 15 years? Good God, man, 15 years as a waiter? That's actually sad. What kind of loser spends their entire life bringing other people food? Couldn't make anything better of yourself. The restaurant went quiet. Even the kitchen sound seemed to fade. Marcus stood frozen, his back to Richard, his hands trembling slightly. In 15 years, he had been overlooked, dismissed, and occasionally treated rudely. But no one had ever attacked his life choices so directly, so viciously. No one had ever tried to strip away his dignity so completely in front of a room full of witnesses. Marcus thought about his brother Jason, about how he had worked 3 jobs to pay for Jason's acting classes. He thought about the nights he came home with feet so swollen he could barely walk, about the holidays he had missed because someone needed to take the extra shifts. He thought about the pride he felt in his wake, in being excellent at something that mattered, at making people's special occasions memorable. He turned slowly, and for the first time that night, his professional mask slipped. His eyes met Richard's, and there was steel in them now. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to moderate your tone. I'm happy to serve you, but I won't tolerate disrespect toward myself or my staff. Richard's eyes widened in mock surprise, then narrowed with genuine anger. You're asking me to moderate my tone? Do you have any idea who I am? I'm Richard Blackwood. I own half the commercial properties in this city. I could buy this restaurant and fire you before dessert. You're nothing. A nobody in a cheap vest who thinks bringing people their dinner makes him important. He stood up now, his voice rising. You're a servant. That's all you'll ever be. A middle-aged servant who wasted his life learning which fork goes where. I've made more money today than you'll make in a year. My watch costs more than your car, and you have the audacity to tell me how to behave. Marcus felt something break inside him. Not his spirit, that was stronger than Richard could ever understand, but his patience. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Around them, other diners were staring now, some looking uncomfortable, others pulling out their phones. The manager was rushing over, sensing disaster. But before anyone could intervene, the restaurant's front door opened. A tall, muscular figure stepped inside, his bald head reflecting the chandelier light. He had come straight from the gym, wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans, but there was no mistaking him. Jason Statham scanned the room, looking for his brother, a smile on his face in anticipation of surprising Marcus. Then he saw the scene at table 7. He saw his brother, the man who had raised him, standing rigid with barely contained emotion. He saw a man in an expensive suit standing over Marcus, gesturing aggressively. Jason's smile vanished. His jaw tightened, and he began walking toward them with the purposeful stride of someone who had played heroes on screen so many times that the confidence had become second nature. Jason moved through the restaurant like a force of nature. Diners who had been watching the confrontation now found their attention split between the aggressive businessman and the unmistakable action star cutting through the room. Phones that had been recording the argument now shifted angles, capturing both moments simultaneously. The atmosphere, already tense, became electric with anticipation. Marcus hadn't noticed his brother yet. His focus remained locked on Richard, his mind racing through options. He could walk away and let the manager handle it, but that felt like surrender. He could respond with equal venom, but that would cost him his job. He was trapped between his dignity and his livelihood, a position too many service workers found themselves in. Richard, meanwhile, was warming to his performance. He had an audience now, and men like him live for attention. Look at you, standing there speechless. That's what happens when someone finally tells you the truth. You're a failure, a cautionary tale. This is what happens when you aim low and still manage to. That's enough. Jason's voice cut through Richard's tirade like a knife through silk. It wasn't loud, but it carried absolute authority, the kind that comes from both natural charisma and years of commanding film sets. Richard spun around, his face flushed with anger at being interrupted. The irritation drained from his features as recognition dawned. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Yo, Jason Statham. That's right. Jason stepped between Richard and Marcus, his body language protective but controlled. He had spent 2 decades learning stage combat and real martial arts, and it showed in every movement. And that man you're insulting? That's my brother. The silence in the restaurant became absolute. Even the kitchen staff had stopped working, peering through the service window to witness what was unfolding. Marcus stared at Jason, his mind struggling to process the sudden reversal of fortune. His little brother, the action hero, standing up for him in the middle of his workplace. Richard's face cycled through several expressions: shock, embarrassment, calculation. Jason could see the wheels turning as the businessman tried to figure out how to extract himself from the situation with minimal damage. But Jason had no intention of making it easy for him. I heard what you said, Jason continued, his voice level but laced with barely contained fury. You called my brother a loser, a failure, a servant. Let me tell you something about Marcus Webb. When our parents died in a car accident, I was 15 and he was 24. He could have put me in care, focused on his own life. Instead, he became my parent, my protector, my provider. Jason took a step closer to Richard, who instinctively stepped back. Marcus worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. He missed his own youth so I could have mine. He paid for my acting classes by working double shift at restaurants just like this one. Every opportunity I've had, every success I've achieved, exists because this man sacrificed everything for me. The emotion in Jason's voice was raw, genuine. This wasn't acting. This was a man defending the person he loved most in the world. Around them, several women were wiping their eyes, and even some of the men looked moved. Sarah, the young waitress, had tears streaming down her face. So when you call him a loser, Jason's voice dropped to something dangerous. When you mock his career, when you try to diminish him, you're not just insulting a waiter. You're insulting a hero, a man who understands sacrifice and dedication in ways your privileged life has never required. Richard tried to speak, his hands coming up in a placating gesture. Look, I didn't know. You didn't need to know, Jason interrupted sharply. You don't get to treat people like garbage just because you think they are not connected to someone important. Every person in this restaurant, every server, every cook, every busboy, they all have stories. They all matter. Your money doesn't give you the right to strip away their dignity. Marcus finally found his voice. Jason, you didn't have to. Jason turned to his brother, and his expression softened immediately. Yes, I did. You spent my whole life protecting me. Let me protect you for once. He put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and love that spoke volumes. Then he turned back to Richard, his jaw set. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize to my brother. A real apology, not some hollow words designed to save face. Then you're going to apologize to every member of staff in this restaurant. And then you're going to leave and never come back. Richard's face had gone from red to pale. The reality of his situation was sinking in. He wasn't just dealing with an angry brother. He was dealing with a celebrity whose reach extended far beyond this restaurant. Phones were still recording. This would be online within minutes. His name, his face, his words, all of it would be public. I'm sorry, Richard stammered, looking at Marcus. But it sounded weak, insincere. Jason shook his head. Not good enough. Try again, and this time, mean it. Richard Blackwood had built his empire through intimidation and ruthless business tactics. He was used to being the most powerful person in any room, the one who set the terms, who walked away from deals that didn't favor him. But standing in the golden line with dozens of phones pointed at him and Jason Statham's unwavering gaze burning into him, he felt something unfamiliar, genuine fear. Not physical fear, though Jason's presence certainly carried that implicit threat. This was deeper, the fear of exposure, of consequences, of watching his carefully constructed reputation crumble in real time. Already he could imagine the headlines. Billionaire humiliates waiter, gets called out by action star. His PR team would have a nightmare on their hands. His business partners would distance themselves. His social circle would whisper behind his back. "I'm waiting," Jason said quietly. The entire restaurant held its breath. Richard swallowed hard and turned fully toward Marcus. This time, when he spoke, there was a crack in his armor. "I apologize. What I said was wrong. Cruel. You didn't deserve that treatment." The words came slowly, painfully, like pulling teeth. "I have no excuse for my behavior." Marcus studied him for a long moment. Part of him wanted to accept the apology and move on, to return to his normal evening and forget this ever happened. But another part, the part that had absorbed too many small humiliations over the years, needed more than just words. "Do you understand why what you said was so hurtful?" Marcus asked, his voice steady now, strengthened by his brother's presence. "You attacked my life's work. You tried to make me feel ashamed of honest labor, of a career I'm proud of. Service isn't beneath anyone. It's noble work. We create experiences, comfort people, celebrate their important moments. I've served anniversary dinners, proposal celebrations, reunions after years apart. I've been part of people's happiest memories." Richard nodded, and for the first time, something like genuine remorse crossed his features. "You're right. I was wrong about all of it. My behavior was inexcusable." Jason turned to the restaurant manager, who had been standing nearby, unsure how to handle this unprecedented situation. "I think Mr. Blackwood should settle his bill and leave now." The manager nodded quickly, relief flooding his face. "Of course, Mr. Statham." He turned to Richard. "So, if you will come with me to the front desk." But before Richard could move, Jason added one more thing. "And Richard, consider this your only warning. If I ever hear about you treating service workers, or anyone else, this way again, I won't just embarrass you. I'll make it my personal mission to ensure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." "Understood." Richard nodded miserably. "Understood." He pulled out his wallet with shaking hands, extracted several £100 notes, and placed them on the table. Far more than his champagne cost. He looked at Marcus one last time. "I truly am sorry." Then he hurried toward the exit, his expensive shoes clicking against the polished floor, his shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. As the door closed behind Richard, the restaurant remained frozen for a heartbeat. Then, starting with Sarah the young waitress, applause broke out. It started slow, then built to a crescendo as diners rose to their feet. They weren't just applauding Jason's intervention. They were applauding Marcus, acknowledging him, celebrating him in a way that rarely happened for people in his profession. Marcus felt overwhelmed. Tears pricked at his eyes, and he didn't try to hide them. Jason pulled him into a fierce hug, and Marcus gripped his brother tightly, this man who had grown from the scared teenager he protected into someone who could now protect him in return. When they finally pulled apart, the restaurant manager approached nervously. "Mr. Webb, I want you to know that we've always valued your work here. You're one of our finest staff members. And Mr. Statham, it would be an honor if you'd join us for dinner. On the house, of course." Jason grinned, the tension finally breaking. "I'd love to, but I insist on paying. And Marcus, you're joining me. Get someone to cover your tables." Marcus started to protest. "Jason, I can't just leave my shift." The manager held up a hand. "Marcus, take the night. You've earned it. The team can handle things." He smiled warmly. "Consider it paid time off." As Marcus and Jason settled at a quiet corner table, away from the curious stares but still within the warm glow of the chandelier light, Marcus felt something shift inside him. For years, he had defined his worth through his work, through his service to others. He had worn his sacrifices like armor, proud but also privately lonely. Now, sitting across from his brother, he realized that his value had never been in question, not to the people who truly mattered. Jason reached across the table and gripped Marcus's hand. "I'm sorry I haven't been around more. The filming schedule, the travel, it's no excuse. You raised me better than that." Marcus shook his head. "You're living the dream we worked for. I don't resent a second of it." "I know you don't. That's what makes you remarkable." Jason's eyes were serious now. "But I want you to know something. That house in the Cotswolds I bought last year, it's not just mine. It's ours. I had the deed drawn up in both our names. You worked 3 jobs for me. The least I can do is make sure you never have to worry about money again." Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Jason squeezed his hand. "Please, let me do this. Not because you need saving, but because brothers take care of each other. You taught me that." The story of what happened at the Golden Lion spread like wildfire. By the next morning, multiple videos of the confrontation had millions of views across social media platforms. News outlets picked it up, celebrity gossip sites analyzed every word, and think pieces about the treatment of service workers flooded the internet. But more than just entertainment news, the incident sparked genuine conversation about respect, dignity, and the often invisible people who make society function. Marcus woke up in Jason's guest room. His guest room now, he corrected himself, to his phone buzzing incessantly. Friend requests, interview offers, messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years. It was overwhelming and surreal. He had gone from anonymous waiter to viral sensation overnight, simply for being himself, for standing up for his dignity in the face of cruelty. Jason was already awake, sitting in the kitchen with coffee and a tablet, scrolling through the coverage. He looked up when Marcus entered. "Morning. You're famous." Marcus poured himself coffee and sat down heavily. "This is insane. I just wanted to do my job." "And you did, but you also showed people something important." Jason turned the tablet around, showing a news article. The headline read, "Jason Statham's brother Marcus, the hero behind the hero." Below was a photo someone had taken of them hugging in the restaurant, both their faces showing raw emotion. Over the following days, the story continued to evolve. Richard Blackwood issued a public apology, which most people saw as damage control rather than genuine remorse. His company's stock took a minor hit, and he quietly stepped back from several high-profile charity boards. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and Richard had been found wanting. But more importantly, the incident opened up a broader dialogue. Service workers from across the country began sharing their own stories of mistreatment and disrespect. Restaurant workers posted videos showing the reality of their jobs, the long hours, the physical demands, the emotional labor of maintaining professionalism in the face of rudeness. The hashtag #ServiceWorkersMatter trended for a week. Marcus found himself at the center of this movement, though he never sought the spotlight. He gave a few interviews, carefully choosing outlets that he felt would treat the subject with proper respect. In each one, he emphasized the same themes: dignity, respect, and the value of all honest work. "I'm not special," he told one reporter. "I'm just one of millions of people who work in service industries. The only difference is that my brother happens to be famous. But every one of us has a story, a life, dreams, and struggles. We deserve to be treated with basic human respect." The incident also changed things at the Golden Lion. Management implemented new training on handling difficult customers and established a clear policy. Staff would never again be expected to tolerate abuse. If customers became aggressive or insulting, they would be asked to leave, regardless of their status or wealth. Several other high-end restaurants in London adopted similar policies, and the trend began spreading to other cities. Sarah, the young waitress who had witnessed everything, found her own voice through Marcus's example. She began advocating for better working conditions in the restaurant industry, speaking at labor organizing meetings and writing articles about her experiences. Marcus became her mentor, just as he had been during her first difficult shifts. 3 months after the incident, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He announced he was leaving the Golden Lion, not to retire, but to start his own restaurant consulting business. He would train new service workers, teach them the skills he had honed over 15 years, and help establish policies that protected workers while maintaining excellent service. Jason immediately offered to invest in the venture, but Marcus refused. "You've already given me enough. Let me build this one myself." It was important to him, proving that he could create something on his own terms. The brothers did find a compromise, though. Jason would serve as a silent partner, helping with connections and publicity, but letting Marcus run the business. The consulting firm, called Webb Hospitality, launched 6 months after the incident of the Golden Lion, and within its first year, it had contracts with 20 major restaurants across the UK. On the anniversary of that fateful night, Marcus and Jason returned to the Golden Lion for dinner. They requested Marcus's old section, and Sarah was their server. She had been promoted to head waitress, a position she had earned through the confidence Marcus had helped to develop. As they ate, Marcus looked around the restaurant where he had spent so many years of his life. He felt no bitterness, only gratitude. This place had taught him his craft, had given him purpose during difficult times, and had ultimately led to a moment that changed everything. "What are you thinking?" Jason asked, noticing his brother's contemplative expression. Marcus smiled. "I'm thinking about how strange life is. One terrible customer, one ugly confrontation, and suddenly everything changes. If Richard Blackwood had just been polite, none of this would have happened." "But it did happen," Jason said. "And you know what? I think it needed to. Not just for you, but for all those people who needed someone to stand up and say that service work matters, that they matter." Marcus raised his glass. To unexpected moments. Jason clinked his glass against his brother's. To brothers who have each other's backs. As they drank, Marcus reflected on how far they had both come. Jason had achieved fame and fortune through talent and hard work, but he had never forgotten where he came from or who had helped him get there. And Marcus had discovered that his years of quiet dignity and steadfast service had been their own form of heroism, one that resonated with millions once it was finally seen. The restaurant buzzed with life around them, servers moving gracefully between tables, guests celebrating special occasions, the kitchen producing culinary art. It was the same scene Marcus had been part of for so many years, but now he saw it differently, not as something he had moved beyond, but as something he would always be part of, always fight for, always honor. Because in the end, the story wasn't really about a rude customer or a famous brother's intervention. It was about the fundamental truth that every person deserves respect, regardless of their profession or status. It was about standing up for dignity in a world that often tries to strip it away. And it was about how sometimes the heroes aren't the ones on movie screens fighting villains. They're the ones serving your dinner, cleaning your hotel room, or ringing up your groceries, doing honest work with pride and grace. Marcus had always been a hero. It just took one ugly moment for the world to finally see it. Retry.